Back in the 1930s, Universal Studios gave us Dracula, Frankenstein, and the Invisible Man. Any horror lover would know that all of these three films were adapted from novels. Seeing how successful creature flicks were, Universal decided to take a risk and make a movie on a completely original monster, werewolves. Well, yes, the 1935 werewolf movie titled Werewolf of London did not garner a lot of attention. The case was rather different when it was revisited in 1941. The Wolfman in 1941 was one of the first depictions of werewolves featured on screen in Hollywood, and it's an iconic film. As you might already know, we're getting a reboot of this movie in 2025, and today, here at Marvelous Videos, we're going to be breaking down why the original Wolfman movie is so iconic and what we know about the upcoming reboot. If you're curious, we suggest you get out your silver bullets and lock the doors, because it's the hour of the wolf. Absolutely marvelous. Before we get into our explanation though, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Written by Kurt Siodmak and directed by George Wagner, The Wolfman is a gothic horror film that had famous actors like Warren William, Bela Lugosi, Claude Rains, Patrick Knowles, and Evelyn Ankers in supporting roles. Our lone Wolfman, on the other hand, was played by 6'2" Lon Chaney Jr. Did you know that the Wolfman is the only classic Universal monster who was played by the same actor in every single appearance? See, the Wolfman was planned out to be the story of a character that every audience member could relate to. On one hand, much like Frankenstein, the Wolfman is a story about a tragic monster. You have Larry Talbot, a wealthy businessman who returned to his ancestral home in Wales after the untimely death of his brother. Larry has been rather estranged from his father, Sir John Talbot, ever since John made Larry's brother the head of the estates. After returning to Wales, Larry immediately falls head over heels for a girl named Gwen Conliffe who runs a local shop. He shows up to her shop hoping to hit on her a little, which went as horribly as you can imagine, and he left the store with a walking stick with a silver wolf's head. This is where we learn about the werewolf lore about a man who changes into a wolf under moonlight at certain times of the year. Despite not reciprocating his feelings at first, Gwen eventually comes around to him and they meet at night with Gwen's friend Jenny acting as a chaperone. On Jenny's insistence, they go to a Romani fortune teller played by Bela Lugosi to have their fortunes told. The fortune teller sees a pentagram on Jenny's hand and sends her away, as the pentagram is the mark that appears on people who are marked to be werewolf food, for lack of a better word. As it turns out, Bela is the werewolf, and he attacks Jenny even though he did send her away. Gwen and Larry hear Jenny's screams, and Larry goes to fight off this wolf with his cane. While he doesn't manage to save Jenny from the fatal mauling, he does kill off the wolf, but not before being bitten himself. This marks the beginning of the tragic life of Larry Talbot. He wants to be with Gwen, but he knows that every time the sun goes down, he'll lose control and become this bloodthirsty lycanthrope who can't control himself. He wants to open up to Gwen and tell her the truth, but at the same time, he can't be close to her because he might end up hurting her. When Bella's mother, Maleva, gives Larry a charm to keep his werewolf transformations in check, Larry gives the charm to Gwen instead, hoping to keep her safe just in case he winds up attacking her. As the movie progresses and more dead bodies pile up, Gwen is marked to be the next victim of the Wolfman, and Larry is definitely distraught seeing the pentagram on her hand. He tries sending her away, but by this point, Gwen is very much besotted with him and doesn't wish to remain away from him. Larry considers leaving town, but his father refuses to let him go. John thinks that all of this werewolf craze is just a mental condition and not anything actually real, so he ties Larry to a chair in the hopes that he'll simply break free from his delusions. However, that night, Larry transforms again and manages to break free of his restraints. He goes out into the night and attacks Gwen. John, who wasn't in the house when Larry broke out, decided to go into the woods to search for Larry. Of course, that's when he comes across the Wolfman attacking Gwen. John beats down the Wolfman with the silver-headed cane that Larry had given him, and eventually the Wolfman is killed. Right then, Maleva shows up and casts a spell. Much to everyone's shock and horror, the werewolf turns into Larry's human corpse, and the movie ends there. Despite a seemingly straightforward premise, the Wolfman garnered quite the fan base. The transformation scenes are quite dated, but they definitely have a charm about them. It took Lon Chaney Jr. 6 hours to transform into the iconic Wolfman, and all the hair that you see on his face and body after the transformation is actually just yak hair. James Whale definitely went all out when it came to this film. However, despite all the great aspects of this movie, from the transformation to the werewolf lore they established, which we still follow to this day, there are glaring problems with the movie. One of the biggest is Lon Chaney Jr. as the Wolfman. While the hero is supposed to be this extremely charismatic man whom we can relate to and sympathize with when things get tough, Lon Chaney's acting skills really leave much more to be desired. The movie's supposed to lean into the whole our protagonist is losing his bodily autonomy and he's turning into this horrific monstrous thing, but the reveal of the monster comes super quick. Also, keen-eyed watchers must have already noticed that when it comes to Bella's werewolf, he turns into a complete wolf who is actually played by a very good boy named Moose. Moose was a German shepherd whom Lon Chaney Jr. adopted as a pet. When Larry turns into the werewolf though, he becomes this half-human, half-wolf hybrid that we usually associate with the werewolf transformations. That was never explained. Also, this movie definitely didn't have the creepy settings that Todd Browning's Dracula or Whale's Frankenstein could boast. This one's just set in some super foggy woods, which makes it feel less creepy and more clumsy. Despite everything said and done, this movie was a hit with the audiences, and while we didn't get any Wolfman sequels, we did end up getting team-ups like Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, House of Frankenstein, and House of Dracula. It kinda makes sense why people wanted this movie to be rebooted in a more modern fashion. We actually did get a reboot in 2010 already, directed by Joe Johnston, and it starred Emily Blunt, Anthony Hopkins, and Hugo Weaving with Benicio del Toro. With a budget of $150 million, this movie earned around $142.6 million, so it was considered a box office failure. Despite that, Rick Baker and Dave Elsey won the Academy Award for Best Makeup, which they definitely deserve. So, now that we've covered everything we needed to know about this character's past, let's discuss his future. Who is behind the making of the upcoming Wolfman film? The year is 2014, and Universal Pictures has just announced that they want to create their very own cinematic universe. This universe, titled the Dark Universe, would see the reboot of Universal's classic Monsters franchise, which are all the monster movies that came out from the 1930s to the 50s. The Wolfman was of course considered for this project, and Aaron Guzikowski confirmed himself as the screenwriter for the reboot in November 2014. 2 years later, in 2016, we learned that Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson was being considered for the lead role in this version of Wolfman. Moreover, by October of 2016, the project was in full swing, and David Callahan had been hired as the screenwriter. However, the critical and commercial failure of The Mummy, starring Tom Cruise in 2017, was a rude wake-up call for the Universal Studios executives. They had realized that perhaps the Dark Universe was a bit too ambitious of a project, so they shifted their focus to individual storytelling and scrapped the whole idea altogether. So, the Wolfman reboot was automatically shelved up for the future. However, in 2020, Leigh Whannell, the brilliant mind behind Saw and Insidious, gave us a spine-chilling retelling of H.G. Wells' The Invisible Man. This retelling was a commercial success, and as horror fans, we can't recommend this film enough. Elizabeth Moss and Oliver Jackson Cohen gave stellar performances and effectively ushered in the considerable success of this movie. Universal decided to lose the restrictions regarding the talent in front of and behind the camera. This resulted in a series of meetings with Universal where a lot of filmmakers pitched their project ideas on the revival and development of other characters in the classic Monsters franchise. One of these meetings included Ryan Gosling's pitch regarding the remake of The Wolfman and his starring in it. Lauren Schuker Blum and Rebecca Angelo were said to be writing a screenplay for this Wolfman with tonal similarities to 2014's Nightcrawler. Several filmmakers were considered for the director's seat, with Corey Finley as well as Leigh Whannell. Corey Finley was liked by the Universal executives, whereas Leigh Whannell was suggested by Jason Blum, the head of Blumhouse Productions, after the success of The Invisible Man. Plus, Whannell had already mentioned his interest in directing a werewolf movie in a press interview in 2020, and as the stars aligned just right in July, Whannell entered the negotiations to write a film treatment, which is basically a prototype screenplay, and to direct. However, scheduling conflicts soon arose and Whannell left the project. Derek Cianfrance joined the project in his place in October of 2021 because of his previous working experience with Gosling in Blue Valentine and The Place Beyond the Pines. However, 2 years later, in 2023, it was reported that Cianfrance and Gosling had left the project together and Whannell was back in the picture. Gosling retained the credit of executive producer, but he was replaced for the lead role. Is it a reboot or a sequel? As we know, the original version of the film follows the journey of Larry, who ends up getting bitten by a werewolf and turns into a wolf every night. He has no recollection of his actions when he returns to his human form. 2 years after this, in 1943, we got Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, where Larry was brought back to life when grave robbers dug him up. They exposed him to the moonlight and all hell broke loose. To get back to his grave, Larry needed to get rid of the werewolf gene, and that's what led him to meet Dr. Frankenstein. Initially, when the reboot was first considered, the plot was said to be pretty much identical to the original story. There would be a man who has to fight tooth and nail to protect his family from a werewolf. When Ryan Gosling was rumored to star in the movie, it was disclosed that he would be playing an anchorman who would be infected with the werewolf curse. However, with Leigh Whannell back in the director's seat and Jason Blum as the producer, the plot of the movie has changed. But not a lot of plot information about this new version has been released, so I guess we're gonna have to wait and find out. But with Whannell as the director, fans are confident that they'll get a good monster movie out of this whole turn of events. Who are the major characters? Christopher Abbott has replaced Barbie star Ryan Gosling as the lead of the Blumhouse and Universal Pictures remake of The Wolfman. Christopher Abbott is quite famous for his recent film Poor Things, which starred Emma Stone. He has also starred in Catch-22, Girls, and The Crowded Room. We also know that Christopher Abbott will be starring in the upcoming superhero movie Kraven the Hunter alongside Aaron Taylor Johnson. Until January 2024, he was credited as the only actor for Wolfman. But in January, we found out that Julia Garner had joined the cast. She's the mother of a family that's terrorized by the Wolfman. Julia Garner is most famous for her roles as Ruth Langmore in Ozark and Anna Delvey in Inventing Anna. We've also seen her in Maniac, The Americans, The Assistant, and more recently, The Royal Hotel. Other than these two, Sam Yeager, who is most popular for his role in The Handmaid's Tale and Matilda Firth from Disenchanted, has also joined the cast, but their roles are yet to be disclosed. Do we have a release date? The Wolfman has been in production since 2020, and finally, after 4 years, we have a release date. Initially, the movie was to be released in October of 2024, but it's since been changed to January 17, 2025. The movie will be sharing the box office with In the Grey and Lavon's Trade. In the Grey is directed by Guy Ritchie and stars Jake Gyllenhaal and Henry Cavill, whereas Lavon's Trade is directed by David Ayer and has Jason Statham and David Harbour. I'm sure a lot of us know about the stigma related to January movies, but for those of you who don't, January is usually considered to be the dumping ground for bad movies. However, with the success of Bad Boys for Life, Split, Megan, and Kung Fu Panda 3, that omen has definitely been dispelled over the past few years. Marvelous verdict! The 1941 film The Wolfman is an iconic movie that literally shaped the way we portray werewolves in popular culture. While rebooting classic films is a hotly debated topic, I think that with Leigh Whannell in the director's seat, we as horror fans are going to get a treat with The Wolfman. He's already done a phenomenal job with his previous films, so we definitely have high hopes for his rendition of this classic. So for all our horror fans out there, don't forget to mark your calendars for the big day. January 17th, 2025. We'll see you in the theaters, so let us know if you guys want to watch this movie and how you're feeling about the reboot in the comments down below. But for now, this is Wheezy249 signing off. If you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.